our friend Joel Klatt from Fox Sports, who's been all over this college football world, and of course spent a great year last year, part of the NFL Network draft coverage in Nashville, and I look forward to doing it again with him real soon. He is now on the Rich Eisen Show. How are you, Joel Klatt?
Good, bud. How are you?
Better for talking to you, man. I hope you and your family, everybody's fine in your world.
Everyone's doing really good in my world, thankfully. And I got to tell you, what an event last night, Rich, right? I mean, the draft in and of itself really is about hope, optimism, and building for the future.
Yep.
Was there a better event for the period in time that we needed as a country than last night? And, you know, a lot of executives, remember, didn't want to do the draft when they first announced that they were going to do it on schedule. And I talked with a lot of them yesterday, the last couple of days, and all of them to a man said, glad we're doing this.
No
this
kidding.
Is the right time. We need to get out there.
No kidding. So many of the evaluators were like, why are we doing this? It's not the way that we're used to doing it. I prefer to wait. Or we're all like, glad we're doing it.
100%. To a man. And to their credit, man, it came off pretty clean. I was worried for technical difficulties, but other than the Raj stumbling over a few things and misplacing a year here and there with Vegas in particular, it went pretty well.
It went very well. And then on our NFL Draftathon live stream, it was a total blast, and people could check it out on NFL.com right now. And I'll be back there at 7 Eastern time tonight. And you, Sir Joel Klatt, you're a busy man yourself. Let's get right into the conversation of the moment. Do you like the pick of Jordan Love by Green Bay to trade up 4 spots to go get him? Do you like that?
No, I don't. And, you know, partly because this is not a team that went 8-8 with an old quarterback. You know, I'm a big believer in any sport, but in particular in the modern era in all professional sports, when you've got to respect championship windows. And when they come around and when you've got a player that can lead you to a championship, you have to respect it. By the way, it reminds me of The Last Dance that we're watching now.
Yeah.
And it's like, how do you not allow them to at least earn it on the court, right? I mean, speaking of the Bulls of the 90s, to me, you're one game away from the Super Bowl in Green Bay. One game. And the last time I checked, Aaron Rodgers wasn't the problem in San Francisco. It was the fact that most of it is still running. And Jimmy Garoppolo had to throw like negative 47 passes. He was like a barrel of oil, right? I mean, like he didn't have to do anything. And there were some defensive players there that they could have gotten that I think are really good players, namely those 2 linebackers that went right after them in subsequent picks, Jordan Brooks from Texas Tech, Patrick Queen from LSU. So I understand building for the future. Some people are saying, hey, they're going to get, they've got all these picks in the middle of the draft that can build there. Yeah, but you got to respect the championship window. And now you're going to just make Aaron Rodgers more disheveled, which is not fun.
Yeah, I kind of agree with all of that. I mean, if you want to make it even worse, too, and I pointed it out before, I mean, the Niners, the team that you were talking about, the quarterback that was leaking like a barrel of oil, they went from a position behind from where the Packers moved up to move up in a spot that eventually was one before where the Packers would move up to take Brandon Ayuk and give him to Garoppolo. Brandon Ayuk.
And here's the thing, talking with some of their people, anybody that was around, and this, by the way, remains the same with LaFleur in Green Bay, but also Kyle Shanahan, is that when they watched Brandon Ayuk, they saw Pierre Garçon, because they had touched him previously. And so Shanahan had Ayuk as his top receiver on the board, right? Like it was Ayuk or CeeDee Lamb. And so from his standpoint, he not only goes and gets a weapon that he deemed a position of need, the top wide receiver amongst that position on his board, but it's clearly something that maybe they struggled with, right? You could even say in the Super Bowl, they needed another target. It couldn't just be Kittle all day long for Jimmy Garoppolo. They needed a wide receiver, and now with some of the exits that they've had in the offseason, they needed to fulfill that position to respect the championship window, and they did it with a guy that they like. No one can say from Green Bay that pick made them better for next year. That's the problem.
Joel Klatt here on the Rich Eisen Show, and then channel your inner quarterback. So how do you think Rodgers truly is feeling right now? Because we're hearing Brian Gutekunst has not spoken to him, and that could be read in many different ways, because Gutekunst is not going to come out and say, well, I tried him 3 times and I got sent to voicemail 3 times. So he's not going to say something like that. How do you think Rodgers truly does feel right now?
Well, imagine for a moment, to make just a really bad reference, imagine just for a moment you're Jeff Gordon in your prime, and they give you a car that is not as good as everybody else's car, and they expect you to go win the Daytona 500. How would you feel? Right? I mean, give him some weapons. It's like Brady with New England. I think it's what probably soured his relationship in New England. It's like, you want me to do what with what? Guys, you got to give me something here. We won the Super Bowl in New England, and then you gave me nothing to work with, and this is the product of that. And I think that Rodgers has got to be feeling the same way. He had to have felt like they're in prime position to select one of these really quality wide receivers, and they were unable to do that. And this is a deep draft of wide receiver. I'm sure we're going to grab one from a Green Bay perspective later today. But if I was Rodgers, I'd be incensed. I don't have forever to play, and you're going to stick Jordan Love behind me? I needed a wide receiver, and then in response to that, all you gave me was more reporters with more microphones in my face asking me about something I don't want to talk about, which is my backup quarterback. No starter wants to be asked about his backup, ever, period.
Joel Klatt here on the Rich Eisen Show. I knew you'd have the perspective that would be fresh and interesting. And the Tua pick, let's get to the Tua pick right now. Do you like that over Herbert? Because I'm assuming Burrow, we shouldn't even talk about Burrow because that was such the no-brainer, number 1 overall, correct?
Yeah, that's right. Okay. And to me, I was Tua over Herbert just because I think that when you look at him play, he does the things that I think translate. Namely, Rich, he anticipates windows. He makes quick decisions, in particular when throwing the football over the middle. He's a quick release guy. He's a short lever quarterback, meaning that, he's not just going to sit there. You have to protect him so he can throw the football down the field with a long motion and long limbs. He can be compact, very Breeze-like, get the football out with accuracy. He's a quality passer, obviously, with accuracy, on time, on target, equals yards after the catch. All of those things are great. For me, he's only got to change one thing, Rich, about his game, and I think he can have a long career. He thinks he's more elusive than he is. Therefore, he holds onto the ball when he's trying to evade, but he can't evade completely. And so he gets rolled up on from behind. That's how he hurt both of his ankles. That's how he fractured his hip. If he can play more in the vein of Drew Brees, which his head coach was trying to tell people that's who he is, if he can play more like Brees and less like Wilson, he can play for a long time and be very effective. And I think Miami's going to be really happy.
And I know, again, because the quarterbacks, that's the bright, shiny object. Nobody's really talking about Chase Young today. And boy, did you and Gus see a ton of Chase Young on Fox. How transformative do you think he can be in this league?
Well, I have to say it this way. I think he's better than Bosa. I think he's better than Nick Bosa because he's longer. He's got all of the explosiveness. He's got all of the energy. He's got the drive, the motor, the skills, the hands, the quick hands, and yet he's a longer player, and that length I think helps him in particular in the run game. Chase is a dynamic guy, and just a quick story. And yes, I saw a lot of them last year and over the last couple of years, but a few years ago, I went to a spring practice at Ohio State, and it was one of the first times I went to a spring practice there after Fox had gotten the contract to do Big Ten games. Wanted to spend some time with Coach Meyer, and I wanted to see the team. Mm-hmm. And so I go out there, and guess who the early enrollee freshmen are on the field? Jeff Okudah, Chase Young, J.K. Dobbins. And guess who J.K. Dobbins is working with offensively, and Okudah and Chase Young are working against from the offensive perspective?
I guess it's
quarterback Joe Burrow.
Yep, Joe Burrow. Right.
And, I think back to that day, and I was so excited to just be able to, check out a new program that I hadn't seen live and talk with Coach Meyer, and I wanted to see Nick Bosa. And the first few steps onto the field, I looked over and I looked at Jerry Emick, who's their terrific SID, and I said, Jerry, who in God's name is number 2? I was like, what is that? because that's freakish. He was a true freshman and should have been a senior in high school.
Mm-hmm.
So fast forward into the fall, I'm doing their game against Maryland. Chase Young walks onto the field. It's one of the first times he gets onto the field, at least in a game that I was covering. And so I immediately hit my talkback button to my producer, Chuck McDonald, and I said, give me some shots of Chase Young right now. I want to talk about him. He says, he hasn't done anything yet. I said, point the cameras at Chase Young. So sure enough, I said, Gus, I hold up my hand to Gus, which is like a no-go. You never hold your hand up to Gus, but I felt strongly about it, Rich, right? Like I had to get this out. So before Chase takes the snap against Maryland, I go on and I gush about it, and I think it's online, actually, and I was like, hey, this kid is unbelievable. The 2020 NFL Draft, you're going to hear this kid's name selected in the top 5. He was a true freshman. Everyone's like, what are you talking about? I'm here to see Nick Bosa. I'm like, this kid is an absolute monster. On that snap, Chase Young got his very first sack in college football, and he never looked back. And I think he's going to be a dominant player, and I think he has the potential to be one of the great pass rushers that we see over the next 10 years.
I love that story from start to finish, even though it's talking about the Ohio State, and it gets me very upset because it makes me upset. But that said, the one thing I really want to just touch upon, pull one string before I finish up about tonight, is nobody gives the hand to Gus Johnson. Is that what you just said?
Oh.
Nobody waves their hand at Gus, right?
You should have seen the look I got, because that was only like our third year together, and he looked at me, and if Chase wouldn't have gotten a sack, I think I would have heard about it afterwards. But because it worked out, and he got to make this really nice call, he's like, and partner, you're all over it, Chase Young, there he is. And then we got to build the star of Chase Young. We go to the break, and he gives me a fist bump, and he's like, nice job. Don't make it happen. And I was like, so good.
I love it. Joel Klatt here on the Rich Eisen Show. Let's go to tonight. Who do you like that's on the board right now as for the rest of the entire draft class, and then focusing on the quarterbacks? Who do you got for me, Joel?
Yeah, the quarterbacks are going to be interesting. I think that we're going to see kind of this debate amongst the NFL organizations that I've been hearing in the next couple of quarterbacks, which I think is going to fall between Jalen Hurts and Jake Fromm. I think those might be the next two names that we hear off the board from a quarterback perspective. And then when I look at it, I see some running backs that are about to go, and maybe fast. DeAndre Swift from Georgia still on the board. You've got J.K. Dobbins from Ohio State. You've got Jonathan Taylor from Wisconsin. You've got Cam Akers from Florida State. All these guys, very good players. You might see a run on them in the second round. And then some edge players that I think that we're going to see pretty early tonight. Yetur Gross-Matos from Penn State, likely going to get selected pretty quickly. You've got Marlon Davidson from Auburn on the edge, and then A.J. Epinesa, the defensive end from Iowa. Check out those names. I feel like we're going to hear them pretty quickly.
Ask the poll question of Joel Klatt before we send him on his day, Christopher.
All right, Joel, who won the first round? Dolphins, Cowboys, 49ers, Buccaneers.
I'm going to go 49ers. It's just ever since this guy, John Lynch, came into the league as a GM,
no doubt,
he's been masterful in the draft, guys. He really has. He trades down again and gets the guy that he targeted in Javon Kinlaw. Then he goes up to get the wide receiver that his head coach covets. So they, in large part, probably got what they feel like is the number 2 defensive lineman in the draft in Javon Kinlaw. And then they get their number 1 wide receiver in Ayuk. So I go with the 49ers. I think they had a great night.
Yeah, and he also drafted Deebo Samuel last year. Just throw that one out there, too. And everyone's looking for their own Deebo tonight. That's for sure, in the second round. Everyone is hoping to strike the same gold. And then you just move around the draft board because they still got Kinlaw by getting a 4th rounder from Tampa, which moved up to take Wirfs. And then they later flipped that 4 to go and move up and get Ayuk. I mean, that's the way you work a draft board, pretty much, right there.
That is exactly right. And
right?
John Lynch again, and he does this every year. It doesn't seem like we just talk about how he just is really good, methodical when it comes to the draft. I'm glad you didn't ask me about the Giants because I don't want to repeat about of what happened last year.
Well, they got protection for Daniel Jones, Joel.
They did.
Right?
And they overdrafted another player for the 3rd straight year. But you know what? If it works out, it works out. And you know what, Giants? Not going to criticize. Not here to talk about the Giants,
So which one do you dislike more, the Daniel Jones pick or the Jordan Love pick?
Oh, Jordan Love.
Oh, wow.
Whoa.
That is particularly strong then, because you were strong about Daniel Jones last year. My God.
The only thing I was strong about with Jones is that I felt like they could have got – it was more the value than it was the pick. Like, Jones was a first-rounder for sure. And I just thought that they could have got him with their second. Remember, they had 2 picks. I believe it was like 18 and 5 maybe, something along those lines, or 6.
Yes, 6.
And they took him with the first one. And I just thought, you know what, you could have gotten a great defensive player and then manipulated the board to select Jones at 12. So I was more upset with the value. This one, though, like, really? You're 60 minutes from the Super Bowl? Mostert's still running. Garoppolo threw 8 passes, whatever it was. And you drafted Jordan Love? Like, what? What are we doing?
And again, he sees the team that beat him be aggressive to get the receiver, and then he sees Brady's new team go and get the tackle to protect him. I mean, just to put it all in perspective. But there is still 6 more rounds of the draft. We'll see. Who knows? You never know. I'll just throw that out there. Thanks for the call, Joel. You're the man.
I appreciate it, guys. Rich, always great talking with you. Enjoy the night, bud.
You too. A pleasure. Joel Klatt, who I should have been working with in Las Vegas tonight, unfortunately. Just phoning in here on the Rich Eisen Show. Hey, you watched all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Watch more right here.